Finally, we can get a glimpse of what this impressive season will be like for Real Madrid with this galactic team that they have managed to put together, a team that for many is the dream team. Being able to gather so many good players seems incredible, but for Real Madrid fans, this is already a reality. My name is Bruno, and let's go to another video. However, in these first 2 games of the season, it was possible to observe some problems, small details that can be pointed out about the functioning of this team. There were only 2 games, the European Super Cup and the debut in the Spanish Championship. But even though it is a short period, there are already some observations that we can make about this team, and that is exactly what we will do now. It is difficult to even try to define what would be the ideal lineup for this Real Madrid team. After all, they have many good players. 1 or 2 are not yet physically available, like for example, Camavinga, who ended up getting injured just before the season started. They're in the European Super Cup. But he is a player who will certainly be an option for Carlo Ancelotti, whether as a starter or at least as a 12th player. There are also other young players, such as Arda Güler, who, especially at the end of last season, showed that he can be very useful this season. The issue of Endrick still needs to be looked into, as he has only just arrived and has a period of adaptation. There are already reports in the press that he could be loaned out in the middle of the season, but for now I will not take that into consideration, as it is still too early to talk about it. This was the team that Ancelotti fielded in both games, both against Atlanta and Mallorca. Courtois, Carvajal, Militao, Rudiger and Mendy in defense. Midfield with Tchouaméni, Valverde and Bellingham. And the attack with Rodrygo, Kylian Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. The main stars, I would say, are precisely these 4 players: Bellingham, Rodrygo, Mbappe, and Vinicius Jr. These 3 who formed Real Madrid's attack in the previous season, one of the best seasons in the club's history, were fundamental. Vinicius Jr., Rodrygo, and Bellingham. And, obviously, now the big star who arrived for this season, Mbappe, a player that Real Madrid had wanted for a long time. He is one of the greatest players in the world, and he definitely didn't come cheap. Many people say that Real Madrid signed Mbappe for free because they didn't pay PSG anything. But the money that Real Madrid would have paid PSG was directed at Mbappe, with bonuses and a very high salary. There is a lot of media involved, a world football star, and a player of his caliber doesn't arrive to be a reserve. I even saw some people thinking that Mbappe would arrive to find space at Real Madrid, but that doesn't happen. A player of his stature doesn't arrive to find space anywhere. Mbappe will be Real Madrid's starter this season. This is an interesting circumstance. And that's where the problems begin. We have Bellingham, who is increasingly becoming an attacking midfielder, so to speak. Last season, he played basically as a striker for almost the entire season, almost all the time. Even now, in theory, with Mbappe occupying the central position, inside the box, Bellingham wouldn't need to advance as much, but he keeps advancing. I think this is both something he has discovered, as he discovered this attacking talent that wasn't explored as much at Borussia Dortmund, and something Ancelotti himself is asking him to keep advancing, getting into the box a lot because he has the quality to be decisive in this way. Another factor to be mentioned is that Real Madrid has an attack made up of 3 players who are left wingers by origin: Vinicius Jr., Mbappe, and Rodrygo. We know that Real Madrid, coached by Ancelotti, is a team that doesn't use positional play. The players move around a lot, going in all directions. Sometimes you see Mbappe here, sometimes you see Mbappe there, but the truth is that in these first 2 games, they have been very focused on the left. There were times when looking at the heat map of the Real Madrid team, everyone was positioned more or less like this, all concentrated on the left side. Many also helped out there. On the right side, sometimes Valverde would be a little further forward, and Carvajal would provide an option in attack on the right side, but most of the players concentrated on the left. They have a lot of quality when it comes to passing the ball around, and they make interesting plays. In the game against Mallorca, we saw some good plays in the first half. In the game against Atlanta, not so much because Real Madrid was still getting into the swing of things in the first game of the season, and it was the first official game these guys played together, so it was a bit strange. But in the game against Mallorca, in the first half, we saw some interesting things, although the second half was disastrous. As I was saying, dear friends, the main reason why this Real Madrid team has been acting strangely at the start of the season is none of that. It's not the 4 stars playing together, nor all the left wingers by trade. The main factor is the absence of Toni Kroos, our great player, the midfielder who retired at the end of the 2023 to 2024 season. Anyone who watched Real Madrid play noticed that, even though Tchouaméni started, who in theory is the first defensive midfielder, he acted more like the first defensive midfielder when Real Madrid didn't have the ball, positioning himself in the defensive midfield. But when Real Madrid had possession, Tchouaméni would move out and Toni Kroos would occupy that space to make all the passes, ensuring that the ball reached the attacking half with quality, so that the players could decide the match. Kroos had the perception to understand when it was the right time to accelerate, when it was the right time to pause, in which direction of the attack the pass should go, and what was the best way to escape pressure. It was very difficult to pressure Toni Kroos. He was a very difficult player to mark. Maybe not so much in the game against Mallorca, but in the game against Atlanta, it was clear that Real Madrid's ball passing this season will suffer if things continue like this, because Tchouaméni, despite being an excellent player, doesn't have half the ball passing ability that Toni Kroos had. So, Real Madrid suffered a lot. In the game against Atlanta, when they applied high pressure, they tried to alternate, dropping Valverde or Bellingham to help with the ball passing, but neither of them could do it the way Toni Kroos did. This makes a big difference, not only in improving Real Madrid's ball circulation, improving the ball passing and the rhythm of the attacks, but also in controlling the match. In the game against Mallorca, Real Madrid went 1-0 up early on, with a fantastic goal from Rodrygo with a pass from Vinicius Jr. But after that, the team created a few chances, but the game started to get out of control. Even though they are very good players, it seems that they still don't know how to deal with the absence of the guy who controlled the game for them, Toni Kroos. For example, you have Tchouaméni at Real Madrid, who is a great player, and the other two midfielders who are playing now, Bellingham and Valverde, are very strong players, with an incredible ability to carry the ball and make progressions. They get the ball and run for 30, 40, 50 meters with it. They have this great ability. They are attacking players. They attack the area a lot. Valverde, in fact, can often play as a midfielder on the right, or even as a right winger, as he did in the Champions League final against Liverpool, playing on the right in place of Rodrygo. So, he's a very offensive player. Bellingham needs no introduction. The forwards are all extremely fast players who like to run towards the goal. This means that Real Madrid, especially in the second half of the game against Mallorca, lose possession a lot and are unable to have any control over the match. With Kroos, even when Real Madrid were winning 1-0, you had the feeling that Real Madrid were still controlling the game, that even if they didn't score a goal straight away, they wouldn't be under pressure from the opponent and wouldn't get scared. Now, it seems that the game is much more lively, and in one of those games, like the one against Mallorca, they ended up conceding a goal. The big factor in this more unstable start to the season is the absence of Toni Kroos. I'm not going to say that he's irreplaceable, because no one is irreplaceable in football, but he's really missing him at the moment, that's for sure. They're still going to try to find an alternative within their own squad, but he's missing him. This, coupled with the fact that Mbappe is not yet at his peak, at the pace he could reach. After all, he missed preseason and arrived to play in the European Super Cup, and we know that when a player doesn't do preseason, it usually takes him a while to get into the rhythm he needs. He will certainly be better as the season progresses than he is now. And also the lack of a more reliable left back. Many did play in these two games, but we know that he gets injured a lot. Fran Garcia is not a fullback that Real Madrid fans are excited about. I like him, I think he can have a solid season, but I know that most fans still have doubts about him. These factors help explain why Real Madrid didn't start the season so well, even with so many good players. As I said, they have a lot of stars, but that doesn't always guarantee success.